Hey guys, my name is Colson Rosa, and welcome back to Seraphim Stories. Today's video, I want to talk to you guys about dilemma, which is incredibly important because of what it does for your story. Without tension, it is incredibly difficult to move a story forward. So I want to specifically talk about 4 different things that really help a story move forward with its tension, help it retain that tension, and help it create stakes that continue to last throughout the entire narrative. But before I do that, I wanted to thank you guys for your continued support of this channel. I'd love it so much if you could like this video and subscribe so that I can keep doing this. And I also want to thank you guys for the support you've been giving me, even as we change the mic setup and the set a little bit. I wanted to let you guys know about my books quickly before I get into the heart of this video. These are each of the novels that I've written so far, going from the first one being The Knights of Torrent all the way to my most recent, The Sentinels. And if you guys are interested in those, I'll leave a link in the description for my page on Amazon. So now to talk about dilemma to you guys, I just want to make it really clear that I think no matter what genre you're working within, there's a lot of different ways to create tension. Tension doesn't always have to be a war. Tension doesn't always have to be a cut and dry struggle of one person against another. 2 people could be working toward a similar goal, just with very different ideas of how to accomplish it, and that could create just as much tension. But the first thing I want to mention to you guys is high stakes. So I think when you have high stakes, they need to very specifically be something that is important to the characters, or at the very least important to the protagonist and antagonist. It's okay if you have a character or 2 who aren't necessarily interested in the problem that's being faced, but you especially want your main characters to be driven by this purpose or driven by this threat of loss that they can't afford to lose. It needs to be something, whether it's as large as a galaxy or as personal as just one man or woman's life. It needs to matter so much to them that if they don't succeed in this story, something significant has been damaged or broken or lost. Now, I think that this can be created in several different ways, but I think probably the best way to analyze whether or not your story has high stakes is to kind of step into your character's point of view, consider yourself in their lives, and wonder if you were them, would this matter so much that it's willing to take them completely out of their normal course of life to fix it, to change it, to make it better. Like I've talked about in previous videos, you don't want to have characters that don't seem interested in the plot, don't seem interested in the story that's going forward. You want this to be some of the most significant moments of their lives. And these moments then will become significant to the reader because they recognize this isn't just an average everyday for the character. This is one of the highlight pivotal moments of their life that if they didn't get this right, everything could be lost. It doesn't mean everything could be lost as far as their lives could be lost or their finances always. It could even be, if I don't make this kind of change within myself, I'm not going to be happy with the life that I'm living. And that's okay too, especially in a lot of dramas, you tend to see that kind of narrative. So the second thing I want to talk about with dilemma or tension is that it needs to be lasting. If the problem starts at the very beginning of the book and is solved halfway through, you need to have a second problem that arises very quickly, or else you're going to lose your readers. If they think the story has kind of been resolved and wrapped up by the end of the climax, then they might not want to read the resolution at all unless you make it really matter to the reader to finish and follow through with these characters. And you especially want to make sure the tension isn't dropped off before the climax, because that's when you need it the most. It needs to be a problem or set of problems that continues at least up through the climax. Now, when I say it could be a set of problems, usually they're very interrelated. So you don't want one problem in the first half of the book and then a problem in the second half of the book that's completely different, completely separated. That could be a tonal shift that really confuses your reader, because if the first half of the book's about a war and the second half of the book is about a romance, then it could easily be confusing. Why weren't these combined per se, so that you have both of those problems running throughout the entire story? That would be a much better way to do it if you want to have both of those elements, is that throughout the entire course of the story, it's building up to that point, both for the height of the romantic interest and the height of the most powerful scenes in the war. So when the dilemma needs to be lasting, you need to consider from the start how you're going to introduce this problem, how much of an impact it's going to have on the setting, on the characters, on the plot, on everything they're doing, everything they're fighting for or against. And you need to then consider, how do I keep this problem going, if not elevating this problem to an even greater height? I think that's something that Pilgrim's Progress does really well. And John Bunyan, when he wrote it, wanted to make sure that even as Christian is on this journey and he's trying to reach the celestial city, that he recognizes that though there are several incredible points of rest for him, when he leaves those points and continues, it just gets harder until he finally breaks through with his friends and is able to cross the other side. And that tension lasts even to the very end of the book, where, for those of you who haven't read the story perhaps, it's incredibly fascinating that with the celestial city, his goal in sight, Christian nearly drowns because he still doubts that he's going to be able to make it there. And that's part of what I'm talking about when it's lasting tension. It's easy to bore a reader if your story just starts to drag on and drag on. And I think this is a problem a lot of stories have, is they'll have good solid tension at the start, but then as the story continues, they'll go down so many side plots or consider so many sort of alternate points that don't matter as much to the main overarching story, that you start to feel lost or bored throughout some of those hills and valleys that the character's going through. You want each scene to continue to build upon the stakes, those high stakes that I talked about. Even if it's a slower scene that's maybe more emotion-based or informative, you want it to tie into the tension. Maybe it's the characters talking about what life would be like if they didn't have this tension on their backs, or them talking about, what have we done right and wrong so far, and how are we going to make it through? We're not making enough progress like we should be. And those can be important because they continue the tension. They don't lose the tension, but they inform the reader on how the characters feel about it. And in that way, it's even developing the characters so that they can then just have not just a cut and dry response like, the problem is bad, we need to do better. You can give them a lot more nuances within their response of, this problem is terrible, but it could be worse. Here's how it could be worse, but here's how it could be so much better. And I know not only do I need to be stepping up, but maybe you need to be stepping up. And characters can then challenge each other regarding this tension to step it up, or challenge themselves, recognizing all of their pitfalls and shortcomings. And I think this ties directly into my next point about tension, is that it needs to be difficult. It needs to be something that is not easily solved for the characters. Even when you get to that climax, if it feels like the characters didn't have to work very hard in the climax to finally solve this problem that's been lasting throughout the entire book, then it can feel incredibly cheap. Like, why didn't you do that sooner? Or why did we spend so much of a book waiting for this moment? And then when it's finally solved, it wasn't that hard. Anyone could have done it. It was pretty easy. Now, the only way that maybe you could have it not be difficult is if there's a lot of other circumstances that then weigh into the solving of this problem. For example, if you're writing a story where the journey is more important than the destination, then maybe the final problem is easily solved because of so many hard, difficult moments it took to reach that climax. For example, if you're telling a tale of rediscovery, where someone's trying to reclaim their life, go through maybe their midlife crisis, and find out, return to who they really are, maybe the journey is what matters the most, in the sense of step by step, painful confrontation to painful confrontation, this character comes to grip with who they really are. But even then, in the climax, when it finally clicks and they finally recognize who they really are, it still is difficult for them. You still want to have that moment where they look back and they say, this took me so much effort. This took so many different people that were pouring into my life that then helped shape me and change me in order to make me a better person, in order to get me to where I needed to be. So, if this problem isn't difficult, then the readers won't feel as much for the character when they get their big shining moment, or even when they fall short. Especially if you're writing a series, not every problem that's presented in the first book needs to be completely wrapped up by the end of it. Now, you do want a sense of satisfaction. You do want to leave your reader feeling like they've accomplished something and they've really made a mark toward that greater problem that's going to take several books to solve. But either way, even for that landmark moment in the first book where they make such great progress, such great achievement toward defeating their problems, it needs to have felt like, though they didn't complete their entire problem, they had to struggle, they had to work for it in order to get this problem solved. Now, for the last point I want to make, it's that the tension needs to be emotional. Your characters need to have strong feelings toward this problem, and they all shouldn't necessarily have the same perspective on the problem. This is something I was really realizing as I was learning to grow as a writer, is that if you give all of your heroes the exact same perspective on the problem, you're missing out on a real chance, a real opportunity to have a lot more layers of difficulties and worldviews and perspectives on that challenge. You can have someone who feels like the challenge is going to be easy to overcome, and then when they're face to face with it, their pride is really hurt and they're shocked to realize that they can't do this on their own. You could have someone else who was warning them, telling them from the start, we're not going to succeed in this if you continue to be so cocky. You could have another person who's oblivious to the problem. They don't fully understand what they're up against. And it's a real wake-up call when they come to realize what this actually means for the story. You could have another person who maybe is a lot more intelligent but a lot more shy, doesn't want to really speak up about their opinions because they're afraid their opinions might be wrong. They're overthinking their opinions, overthinking it time and time again until they begin to doubt even their own perspective on the problem. And even though they're the one that should be leading, they've taken a back seat because they don't trust themselves to make the right call. A problem is excellent when it brings out the best and worst of people. It really tests their morals. It really stretches them and pushes them to see, what are they doing right? What are they doing wrong in regard to this problem? Are they being selfish, even trying to solve this problem alone? Or are they having a wrong perspective, and this problem they were fighting so hard against really isn't the main struggle in their life at all? It's something much deeper rooted inside of themselves that they ought to have fixed. And this problem, or this person, because a problem doesn't always have to be something physical that characters are interacting with. It can be a person that they're just fighting against or trying to stop, trying to ruin their lives in a sense, or counter their terrible actions that they think are being done against them. And maybe they come to realize through a lot of difficulty and through a lot of high stakes emotional situations that they had the wrong view on this person and they were not reading them the way they should have been. Or you could take it the flip side, as you can with so many of these different stories, where you can say maybe the character they thought they could trust the most, or they thought was the most innocent or the most excellent, wasn't that way at all. And then an instant problem is created as that person tries to take over all the hard work they've been putting into it. And I know I've been talking a little bit in big picture, overarching scope, but I'm really trying to speak to so many different kind of authors that write such wonderful and unique kinds of stories. But I think all of these things, high stakes, lasting tension, a difficult problem, and an emotional dilemma, need to be upheld throughout all stories in fiction because of the massive benefits they provide in touching your reader, making them feel the blow of every loss and cheering for every victory. And that's something I think each author should really try to include, not just in their entire plot, but scene by scene through all of it. So I want to thank you guys so much for listening to this video. I hope you leave some comments down below about what kind of problems you've seen that really need to be fixed, maybe in some of the lives of some of your characters, and how you're starting to work through your characters' responses to those problems and how they're going to fix them. So guys, thank you so much. I would love it if you could leave a like on this video or consider subscribing to hear more about this wonderful skill of writing. And I thank you guys so much. I hope you have a great day. God bless.